It's been 47 years of independence for the country, Angola, and we right here in News Central TV are celebrating the country independence 47 years down the line after the Alvo Agreement in 1975. I am Rita Omodia, and I'll not be doing this alone. I have with me a dashing gentleman.
Uh-oh.
Okay, he's blushing. All right.
I really did see that coming so much. Thank you so much. You look beautiful, by the way.
Thank
as
you.
always, Rita.
As always, yeah.
Yes,
and
yes.
of course, I'm exemplifying Angola. Angola is one country
Yes.
with beautiful and impressive landfalls.
Yes.
I know the official language is Portuguese, of which they got the independence from Portugal. You know, aside other countries where we had getting independence from Britain and France, Portugal was the one that they got the independence from in 1975, and it was not a very easy one. You know, Angola wasn't one of the countries that got the independence on a gold or a silver panel. You know, they had the Civil War, they had the Liberation War, they had lots of things going on for them.
Yes, even after the independence, they had the Civil War because there was really no structured form of, government or governance. And so the MPLA then, stepped into power. And before, it was a uni-party system, and then later, UNITA joined in, it became a multi-party system.
Yeah.
And right now, they practice, the presidential system of government.
Definitely.
So it's a beautiful country. There are some interesting facts about Angola, right? And part of those facts is Angola actually, has, quite impressive economy, particularly the capital, Luanda.
Yeah.
Luanda is exceptionally beautiful, right? For if you really want to look for a place to probably, go on vacation, Luanda might just be the place to go. And Angola also is the 7th largest country in the African continent. It's a beautiful place to be.
It's quite impressive for Angola, seeing after so much civil war, liberation war, trying to gain their independence, they can still have a comeback for the economy. And just in August, they had their general elections, of which the MPLA, who has been in power since independence, is actually still won the election with about 51.3%.
Absolutely.
It's a quite close majority. I mean, looking at the other party too, Adalberto Costa Jr., the UNITA party, who had about 43%. So for the first time, we're seeing a close margin, but we'll discuss all
of that.
Politics and governance.
But just the icing too. Do you know that the very popular samba dance, the one that, people shake and all of that, there's a bit of contention as to the origin. Some actually are of the opinion that it started in Angola and not Brazil. Yes.
Wow, I never knew that.
It's very healthy. Yeah. So for those of you probably you like to dance, I'm sure for those people that dance, they know the samba dance where you shake and all of that.
Can you dance the samba dance?
Okay,
I think that's where we'll put a full stop. Now, we're expecting you to say that, don't worry, after the program, after the special broadcast, we'll have the samba dance. And I also wonder what's going on in Angola so far, Independence Day. I'm sure they will have their own special activities for their independence. And we're not going to be doing this alone. We have people coming all the way from Angola who are going to be joining us for this discussion. And right on our first guest, as we discuss politics and governance for the first half, we have Osvaldo João, as a local government and public policies analyst, all the way from Luanda, Angola. Thank you so much, João. And Dapo right here was saying how beautiful Luanda is, so I can just imagine how much you're enjoying the whole scenery at the moment. All right, we also have Edmilson Angelo. He's an Angola studies expert, also from Luanda, Angola. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us on this special broadcast.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, so I'll begin with you, João. Looking at 47 years down the line of independence, I mean, how has the country fared so far? Can you hear me? All right, while we're still trying to get the audio, if you can't hear me, I'd like to throw that question back to Angelo. Angelo, if you can hear me, tell us how it's been 47 years down the line after getting independence in Angola.
Right, so that's a very good question. I mean, obviously, good morning to you guys. So 47, right, looks like it has been a long journey, but the truth of the matter is that we're still a very young country. I would perhaps even, say that it's 47 minus 27. Because obviously, right after our independence, we embarked into one of the longest civil war in the continent that has lasted for 27 years. So for many people, our country actually only started, or our nation only started in 2002 when we got our peace. But the truth of the matter is that our history has been a roller coaster. And I think it's one that actually gives a lot of pride for people who actually are still connected to the history of the country. But obviously, I think what's happening in Angola right now is that we are trying to really figure out what it means to be independent, even though we celebrate our history a lot. And I say that because it seems like we are still trying to deconstruct the idea of what it's like to be independent, because histories or days like these, we tend to focus a lot on figures like the founding father, Agostinho Neto. But now that we have a population that is very young, that is not very much connected to the past, and that perhaps have got new reference in terms of history, we're still trying to figure out how can we utilize our history of 47 years of war, 47 years of conflict, 47 years of economic downfall and also economic fairy tales. How can we utilize our history and perhaps make our country better for the present and for the future? But 47 years, like I said, there has been a lot of different events that mark our history. Whether it is our victory in the Quituquana Valley War, whether it is us coming together as people and actually embarking into a peace, whether it is Angola becoming one of the fastest growing economy, not just in the continent but around the world, but also what we have been doing in the past years, whether it's through our economic downfall, but also through the process of the last elections, which perhaps marks a new page for our history.
Okay, and I'd like to throw another question now to Osvaldo. You said a whole lot on the 40 years, 70 years of independence. I know one of the major things, one of the major hallmarks was the Alva Agreement between the Portuguese government and the Angolan party, which gave rise to Angola's independence. How much of impact has it had on the country's independence back in 1975?
Is that question returned to me or to Jean?
Oh, Joe, Osvaldo, can you hear me? Okay, while we still try to get him, I would just like you to answer that question also, Angelo.
Right. So basically, the Avo Accord, basically, what it has meant up to now is that even though it was like a symbolic moment for us to come together and come into an agreement, the truth of the matter is that after that we embark into one of the deepest and one of the longest civil war. So I guess the whole process of decolonization did not happen in a manner that could perhaps promote peace in the country. And I think that's not just a reality for Angola, that's also a reality for Mozambique and other countries that were colonized by Portugal. Because Portugal didn't want to give in and we had to literally fight for independence, we embarked into a process that really did not do any good for our country and that perhaps even delayed our process of building the state or building the nation. So in a way or another, all these accords that we have done, they were good because they are reference for us, embarking towards independence. But at the same time, they really took us to a stage that perhaps we could have avoided. And obviously, that's the reason why we wasted. I mean, we wasted so many years fighting one another when we could at least just come up with a plan where everybody could actually do something for the country after independence.
All right, Angelo. Just quickly, I would also want to ask the level of, political awareness and involvement, particularly democracy. How would you say it is with the people of Angola? Angola has about 2 major parties. And we are talking about a democracy here. Is Angola at the moment democratic enough?
Right. That's a very, very important question. And I think, in the introduction, you guys said it very well, that after independence, Angola was a one-party state. Until then, around 1992, that's when we actually embarked into a multi-party country. And obviously, up until now, we're still under the control of the 2 major parties that were part of the whole process of independence, which is the MPLA and UNITA. But I think perhaps the 2 elections that mark perhaps our level of democracy is obviously the election in 1992, when perhaps was very contested, and obviously the numbers between the 2 parties was pretty much wasn't a massive gap, and that's the reason why also we embarked into a civil war. Up until then, the MPLA has obviously got in control of the country and has literally won all the elections up until the one we had this year. But the truth of the matter is that obviously, with the downfall of our economy around 2010, obviously the government started to be more exposed to social pressure from the public. And this is a different type of public. These are people that are well more educated, These are people that have obviously dreams for the future and that did not be part did not take part in our history in terms of the Civil War. And I think in terms of democracy, there's still a massive, it's still we're still going on baby steps, but definitely we are moving towards a country that is perhaps more developed in terms of democracy. And I think the last elections, in particular, obviously with the coming of João Lourenço into power in 2017, there was obviously a lot of more space that has been open for people to contestate. There's a lot of more space that has been open for the opposition to have more space of maneuver. And the election in 2002 was perhaps a reflection of how Angola is indeed embarking towards a more democratic state, even though there's still a lot of things that we can question. But the participation of the civil society, obviously the feedback from the international community only points towards a country that is perhaps taking massive steps into a more democratic state. And I think the main player here is civil society, who perhaps before was not very much involved in the whole process of governance. But now with social media, with all these new spaces, we are now becoming more aware of our rights, and people are now questioning and asking for those political demands. So I would definitely say that we still got a long way to go. Like I said, we're still a very young country, but there's definitely more steps towards that.
Definitely more steps to go. Now, Osvaldo, if you can hear me, kindly unmute your device, please, if you can hear me. Now, we're looking at the independence journey so far, and UPLA has been a party, or rather been in power since 1975 when Angola got its independence. We had Eduardo dos Santos ruling for about 37 years until he passed on power to João Lourenço, who won these recent elections. Now, MPLA been in power for 37 years. In fact, for the whole time since independence, because we're just looking at Eduardo dos Santos, how has it been for the party at this point? Osvaldo, if you can hear me, kindly unmute your device so that we can hear you. Osvaldo, can you hear me? All right. Osvaldo, we cannot hear you, but if you can kindly unmute, we would like it so that we can hear your take on all this. But while we're waiting for Osvaldo, now, Angelo, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to take this back.
That's all right. That's all right.
Take this back to you once again. So we have in the MPLA been in power since independence, and even till now, in the just concluded elections, we still saw MPLA have about 51%. How has it been so far?
Right. So it has been a roller coaster for the MPLA, and I think there's been this shift within, political parties that have been running this country since independence, that they are now being faced with a new reality that they're becoming very uncomfortable. And I think the last election was perhaps a true example of how civil society has put on check one of the most powerful systems in the whole continent. But I guess if we have to do sort of like a historical perspective of how the MPLA has done, obviously they've been ruling our country for forever, pretty much. And obviously in the course of doing so, there have been moments where they have been at the peak, and I think perhaps the end of the Civil War really presented an opportunity for the MPLA to build a country with the whole power that they had. Obviously came China on board, which also helped in the whole process of rebuilding the country. The country really became a fairy tale story in terms of economic growth. And the MPLA was in a very comfortable situation. But the truth of the matter is that for many people who actually look at the war as perhaps years that have delayed the future, and then with the prosperity, with the economic growth, once people started to realize that perhaps all that economic growth was not really being translated into developing in terms of social development, people started to realize that perhaps we have to put more pressure into the ruling party, and obviously the ruling party needed to adjust, and that's perhaps why we saw the end of Dos Santos in 2017, and then came João Lourenço, a new face under the same system. But the truth of the matter is that even though we got a new president, I think in 2022, the message from civil society was that if the MPLA does not reinvent himself, not just in terms of leadership, but in terms of how the whole system operates, they are in danger. They are literally, they will face challenges, not just from the UNITA, but from civil society as a whole. So I guess if I had to do a little analysis of how it has been for the MPLA, they have been running the country, they have got the power, but more and more, they are starting to put themselves in a position where they can start perhaps seeing more challenge from the opposition, and perhaps new political parties are emerging.
All right, Angelo, I might just want to hold you there. You keep making reference to the civil war. I just want to ask, are there still scars of the war that, as a country, have not been addressed, still keep biting hard? Because in every of your statements, you keep making reference to the civil war. Are there issues that really need to be addressed, moving forward?
Right. Definitely. So there's obviously this understanding that if you don't have the Civil War as reference as well, we'll never truly understand how much we're able to do in the years after the Civil War and how much more we can do if we actually govern the country in the right way. Obviously, for many of the generations today, the Civil War is nothing like a story being told by the grandparents. We don't have much reflection on the Civil War. And people now, the reflection is Angola when it was at its peak versus the reality of many people in Angola today that doesn't reflect a sort of good life for many people. So obviously there's still social issues that now have to be solved. And obviously for these youth that don't have any reflection of the Civil War, they'll never have that as a sort of like an answer to the frustrations. And I feel like obviously today the challenges are new, and I think the government is aware of that. The times are different, and the Civil War has come to an end. The country has now got its chances to get a good economy that would perhaps take the country into a different directions. But then again, all these promises being made after the Civil War that were not conquered. I feel like obviously you are right when you say that there are new challenges, and this is now where much of civil society are using as reference that I still have not been addressed. And that's perhaps now the country is moving towards a direction where we are talking more about how can we solve the social issues that we're facing, and how can we diversify economy in a way that make us build a country that we all want. So obviously the Civil War is still important, still there, but like you said, right now there's still bigger issues, and that's why I said in the very beginning, we have to deconstruct what it means to be independent, because for many people, it's not just us waving our flag, it's about economic freedom, it's about social justice.
All right, just a quick follow-up on that, Angelo. I want to move to the parliament right now. How much of representation is there in the parliament, particularly for the people of Angola, and how much of an influence does the parliament have in decision making? Because apparently the president seems to be the alpha and omega, looking at the power structure, so to speak, arrangement of things.
Right, very good question. We have to obviously explain that Angola is a country that is ruled by a system where the power lies within the executive power, which is the president. So pretty much everything moves around the president. And obviously the parliament, which will be there to do the checks and balance, they don't really have much power in terms of decision making. However, obviously now we have got a different scenario where we have an opposition that is perhaps more represented within the parliament. We have got more people from civil society that can perhaps push towards putting more pressure into the system, but the MPLA still has the majority, and all the decisions still coming from the party. From the president. And that's why one of the biggest debates within Angolan politics is when are we going to change our constitution so that we can have a system that allows for more checks and balance between the executive power, between the judiciary power. So all these things are really what people has been asking for it since 2002 when this constitution was declared. So I would say that the parliament is still there more as a more representation rather than really real checks and balance. And obviously, because all the power lies within the president, much of the decision is still being there. And when it goes to the parliament, because the MPLA has got the majority, they tend to edit all the time and be passed. All the policies coming from the government always approved in parliament because of the majority from the MPLA.
Okay. Angelo, I'm going to get back to the issue of changes in the constitution, but I want to also go back to the party formation. We have two major parties, as earlier stated, the MPLA and the United Party. Now, going to the temptation of the independence, we had Jonas Savimbi and other parties forming for the liberation of Angola. What was the major discord between the MPLA and the United Party right from inception of the parties of independence and even till now?
Right. So I think we can literally divide these by in different ways. Perhaps it's the urban versus perhaps the urban versus the rural. How the MPLA had control of the urban cities, like Luanda, where it sort of became like a gate where the MPLA was trying to bring as many people as possible, and that's why today Luanda still, even though it's the smallest province in terms of size, is the most populated one because that's where the power pretty much lies on it. and obviously have also got UNITA that had control of important areas where we had natural resources, such as diamonds. But the truth of the matter is that it became really a question of power. But the problem also started from the very grassroots of it, which is how the Portuguese, in a way, just decided to give power to the political parties that they said are the ones that helped to fight against the system in Portugal, the Salazar system in Portugal. So basically, it was UNITA, it was MPLA, and it was FNLA, which was perhaps the first main party, FNLA. But then again, it became, as the time went on, it became sort of like diminishing because of the space that the MPLA and UNITA got. But the truth of the matter is that there was so much influence also in terms of international power that made this civil war continue for a very long time. And that's why I mentioned Angola was also the space where we had also glimpses of the Cold War between Russia and the U.S., between the Soviet Union and the U.S. And obviously through that, MPLA getting support from Russia and Cuba, while UNITA getting support from the U.S. That escalated things even more. But at the top of it was just how MPLA had control of the urban areas and had control of the main gates, while UNITA had access to resources and were trying to mobilize. And I guess the world was divided in a moment where we're going through a war, and that also influenced the how much we went on in terms of our civil war. But I guess it was just power that was at the core center of this division. It was literally power.
All right. Angelo, I just want you to give us a sort of picture of the level of freedom.
Okay.
Okay, probably we should listen to other guests.
Okay.
Let's hold on Angelo for a bit. I think Osvaldo is still with us.
Yes.
Osvaldo, are you with us?
I think Osvaldo did.
Okay.
All right. Okay, wonderful. So, Osvaldo, we're looking at the whole civil war happening and the effects of the civil war and the Angola that we have up today. What are still the burning questions, the burning demands of the people from the civil war? Osvaldo, can you hear me? Osvaldo, can you kindly unmute your device, please? Kindly unmute if you can hear me, please. Okay. All right.
Okay, I guess we'll just stick with Angelo for now. So, Angelo, I want to get back to you. I want you to give us a picture of the level of freedom in Angola. I saw a report, that said that to take pictures, right, of public spaces, utilities, government buildings, even the currency, you need some level of clearance, right? Written document, so to speak. I mean, for me, that's some sort of news. What kind of state, is Angola? Is it the system there? Is it a police kind of system, or give us an idea of the level of freedom of expression there?
Right. Obviously, before I answer that question, I just want to say, if somebody is listening to me, it's a shame that we can't hear him, because obviously it's a special day, and I wanted to share with my brothers and sisters as well. But I hope I'm doing justice to his absence, or at least his technical issue. But going back to your question, that's a very good question, because I think it's also important for us to deconstruct some of these myths about democracy in Angola, or at least freedom in Angola. Obviously, in terms of taking a picture of a document, it's not really like that. Obviously, we had times when it was really, really difficult. And I think Angola for many years became a very close country that even foreign researchers could not even go in, just because of the level of uncertainty and danger in terms of you having the freedom and the space to carry out research, for you to talk about politics. It was a very close space in terms of freedom of expression and freedom of speech. But obviously, I guess with the new dynamics that has been happening, not just in Angola, but across the board, it would be inevitable for these spaces to be open in Angola. Today, people talk about literally everything. People have platforms where they make fun of the executive power. This is something that we would never even imagine a few years from now. As you can see in the image that you guys are showing, there's more people protesting, there's more freedom of expression, just because the means that people have today allow them to expose the state in a way that never has been seen before. And that's because people now have access to new space of resistance. People have social media, which for me, I think has been solidified within Angolan politics and the relationship between those who govern and those who are governed. But again, because of the system that we have, And because historically, this has been a country that when the system feel uncomfortable, they use power and they use intimidation to try to sort of like, take back control. We have got episodes of people that have been beaten, people have been going to jail for unreasonable reasons. But the truth of the matter is that the space has continued to be open. And obviously, João Lourenço, when he came into power, this was one of the messages that he sent it on to the people. It was like, we have a country that was going to be more open, where people are going to be more allowed to speak about literally everything. And they have opened some spaces. And then, together with these spaces that have now been open, such as social media, there is more space for people to talk about politics, for people to protest, and for people to literally utilize to sort of do checks and balance. Because now social media is perhaps the number one weapon being used by civil society, not just to put pressure on the government, but also for them to communicate the voices. So I would definitely say that even though in comparison to other countries in Africa, we're still a little bit behind, but looking at history, I think we are moving towards a more open country where people can have freedom of expression.
Okay, now looking at João Lourenço, now he has won a second term, or rather he won a second term in August. And you talked about the different things that João Lourenço did to the governance. Now, one of the major things he talked about was corruption. I mean, we saw the former president, Eduardo dos Santos' daughter, Isabel dos Santos, removed from power. We also saw the son too. There are a lot of corruption moves by João Lourenço, but some people have said that it's a bit one-sided and it's just against opposition. I mean, how true is that?
Right. So basically, that has been one of the biggest, one of the biggest, plans, or one of the biggest flags, but that has been used or waved by João Lourenço since he came into power. And it's important for us to mention that it's not just any type of corruption; it's internal corruption within the political party. And I think this is the reason why, when he became the candidate for the MPLA, and he started to talk about how no one is untouchable, how he wants to do a sort of like internal revolution, because he knows how the system operates. This is something that made many people have hope. That this is something that made many people feel like, okay, now we're going to have a different type of system. And obviously, as soon as he came into power, he started to go against people that we never thought he would go against, such as the daughter of the former president, Lourenço dos Santos. We had cases on Isabel. We had cases on other sons of the former president. We had cases about on big people in terms of the army as well. So it became something that became really important for Lourenço's first mandate. But the truth of the matter is that those other peoples that people perhaps thought that could at least be facing the justice because of corruption as well, that they were not touched. And people started to question to what extent is this fight against corruption really for everyone, and that's perhaps why, with all the scandals that started to come out around the first mandate, all this idea about corruption became a little bit not so welcome by the people, because what he did in the first 2 years, he started to sort of slow down in the third and the fourth and the fifth year. And obviously this time around, even though they won, it was clear that the whole talk of corruption, the whole talk about how we have to create a revolution internally, did not really do any justice, or at least did not really become too popular among civil society for the new mandate. And that's why today the talk is not so much on corruption, but rather on how can we solve the social issues of our country. And perhaps that's what people really wanted. How is your fight against corruption being translated into you improving people's life? Where is this money that you're getting in return being invested in terms of creating infrastructure for people? So all these things that was really good in the beginning was not really so much, did not really mean much in terms of people's life, and that's the reason why today, after winning the second mandate, the talk is not so much on corruption, but rather on social issues that really matter for the public.
All right. Just quickly, let's move to the judiciary, right? Angola has about 3 chambers, but the twist to this is that all the key officers, judicial officers, are appointed by the president. So my question is this: how autonomous is the Angolan judiciary right now?
Right. Again, just like the assembly, the judiciary power again doesn't really have much space of maneuver, even though we tend to hear whenever we have got a case that is very, that is being discussed in the media, we tend to hear how the powers are separated, how the judicial power has its independence for them to, operate as they like. But the truth of the matter is that there's still a level of influence from the political party in terms of decision making, in terms of the judicial system. And also we have to understand that there has been cases where it's not just that the president appoints all these chambers or the people that are in these chambers, but also many of these people, they are associated with the ruling party. So they come from the ruling party. So that on itself already sort of sends a message that besides anything, the powers are still very much connected and the decisions might be influenced by that. But I feel like, and we have got a strikes from workers of the judicial system just I think 2 days ago. I think more and more people are trying to send the message that we need to separate the powers and we have to allow people to work properly and independently. Otherwise, we will never bring a country that really moves forwards in terms of development. And like I said, just like the parliament, all these questions of the president appointing all these people represent our judicial system, people who are there being part of the ruling party rather than actually being independent. All these things putting into question the extent the extent by which all this system is really independent, and that's why for me it becomes a difficult answer to say whether it's independent or not, because there are many cases that one can see that has been influenced by higher powers, but also there are cases where it seems like they operate independent. So I guess we're always going to go back to how the Constitution is built, and that's perhaps why we always have to return back to the Constitution that we have.
Okay. All right, I'm hoping that this time around Osvaldo will be able to join us. Osvaldo, we'll be looking at 47 years of independence, and Angelo has created quite a tight atmosphere, tight political environment in Angola. I would like to have your own view of that, if you also agree, because you're talking about the parliament and, of course, judiciary being influenced by the presidency, and also talks about constitution change. What are the talks in Angola at the moment? Osvaldo, can you hear me? Osvaldo, can you hear me? Osvaldo, okay. All right, so we'll stick with Angelo then. So Angelo, now, what exactly are some of the constitutional changes that people have been clamoring for? Because you've clearly stated it so many times, and from what you've given, it's quite a tight political environment for a country. You know, yes, you said it's growing little by little, but I mean, these constitutional changes would give the needed independence for the different institutions of the government. So what are the plans for constitutional change by Joao Lourenço? Has he made any plans? What are civil society organizations saying concerning constitutional change?
Right. So basically, there isn't much conversation in terms of the political system on how they intend to change the constitution. We haven't got any of that yet. There was this perception that perhaps Joao Lourenço would at least touch on that, and just to express how much he really perhaps doesn't want to use a constitution that was tailor-made for Dos Santos. But the truth of the matter is that that constitution has persisted and is still being there, and there isn't much intention from the ruling party or from the government to change. But in terms of civil society, and just even in terms of academia, there has been a lot of discussion on some of the things that allow the country to operate the way it's operating. And if we perhaps consider changing those elements of the constitution, we might actually be perhaps in a system that allows for more democratic development, for more inclusion, and for better participation in terms of civil society. And some of that, or perhaps the central one, is how can we decentralize power? How can we put or divide or put the powers where they belong in order for us to have a more system of checks and balance? And it goes back to that. How can we have the power of the parliament being the power of the parliament to do the checks and balance to the government? How can the judicial power have its own power rather than depending on the president? So how can that power be decentralized? And that even goes beyond that. Even in terms of governmental structure, the president can be the one that elects everyone, elects the governors, elects the municipal leaders. We can't have the president making all the decisions, right? So, and some people then this actually takes us to one of the biggest talk also, which is local elections, and these elections that we had also sort of like instigated more conversation on how can we sooner or later implement local elections, because it's impossible for people to be elected or to be ruled by people that they don't feel represent, people that they don't feel like represents them. So I guess at the center of these changes, obviously there are many others, I guess is the decentralization of power and how much participation people can have in terms of voting for the people that are actually, they want to be there representing them. And I think those are perhaps the main ones that I see it. that are actually also reflective of what we had in terms of the result of the last elections and the biggest debate since this constitution was implemented, which is there's too much power. And with so much power, it's literally impossible for us to have a proper system of checks and balance that allows the government to operate in a manner in a manner that allows us to see, that is more transparent and that is actually allows people to see that the country has got democracy and participation from everyone. So I would definitely say those two elements.
All right, Angelo, just quickly, right now, the COP27 is on in Africa, and the biggest focus of the world right now has to do with climate change. We are seeing flooding, droughts, in places and parts of the world that, many years ago, one would never have imagined, it would happen. And Africa right now, seems to also be experiencing a bit, not just a bit, but, a chunk of this climate change. Angola, for instance, has desertification and lots of forest issues. Are there political moves by the government of Angola to key into the climate change initiative that the world, is currently focusing on?
Right, a very good question. Perhaps this is one of the biggest debates, not just in Angola, but globally. And I hope that I'm not trying to pass a very pessimistic image of my country, because Angola is amazing. And if I'm here discussing while smiling, because I'm very proud of my country, and I feel like we are definitely moving towards the right direction. In terms of climate change, and I say it with a smile because I'm also very much involved in civil society movements, and I think Angola has been a very, 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 very good leader in terms of showing cases out. African states and Angola can become leaders within these discussion on climate change. Right now at COP27, we actually have got our vice president. So Angola, for the very first time, elected the first female vice president in our history. And we have got many leaders within civil society that are doing amazing work that are being recognized globally in terms of climate change movement. And I feel like Angola, in terms of politics, and this is something that the Minister of Environment is doing very well, there is a lot of policy that has been passed that actually reflect how much Angola is taking the whole discussion on global warming very serious. Obviously, we have got a lot of natural resources, and much of our attitudes on climate change moves towards putting higher taxes into these companies, moves towards trying to do more in terms of social movement, civil society that promotes the protection of the environment. There isn't, I wouldn't say there is perhaps many examples of big scandals in terms of how climate change has been dealt with in Angola that can perhaps be discussed at a global level. But we have indeed many reserves that we believe are extremely important, not just for our country, but even for the region as well. So we've got a province, Pitu Panaval, where has been a big reference, not just for the regional aspect of the global warming discussion, but also even globally. We have got many initiatives that are coming out, even being led by people like the First Lady, that showcase how much serious we are taking this discussion. And the fact that the president has even, I think it was last year, he was recognized as champions of the earth because of some of the initiatives that Angola has done in terms of the protection of the environment. All these elements really showcase how serious Angola is taking this discussion. And obviously our presence in all these big forums is also a big reflection of how much we want to be part of these, because this is not just a problem for us, it's a problem for all. And I think we as a country are doing pretty well in trying to be part of this discussion.
Definitely a problem for all, and a lot of world leaders are clamoring for cutting greenhouse gas emissions, especially as the COP27 is still ongoing. Now, in all this, there's been an enlightenment for youth. We see youths also participating, championing this climate summit, this climate change awareness all over. Now, coming back to Angola, how is the youth participation in politics and affairs of governance? Are they just sitting at home, or what exactly is their participation in the politics of Angola?
Right. So this is perhaps the moment where the youth has perhaps realized that it's now our time. We are talking about a country where the youth account for majority of the population. We are talking about a country where the youth now more than ever has got more access to education. They are more aware of what it means to be an Angolan youth that has a lot of challenge to face, while at the same time represents perhaps the biggest resource of the country for us to move towards a country that we all dream of. And I feel like the biggest example was perhaps the 2022 elections, whereby many people perhaps thought that the youth wouldn't express their voices. But the 2022 elections, in my understanding of it, is perhaps the biggest way of communication from the youth, saying that now more than ever, we want to be part of the process of governing of our country. We want to make sure that our voices are heard. We want people who are ruling the country to open up spaces to discuss our issues. And this is why perhaps this is one of the analysis that I did when Lorenzo came into power, is that the Angolan youth could become all his biggest blessing, all his biggest curse. Because when he came into power, he started to make a lot of promises. And, he said that he was going to offer 500,000 jobs to the youth. And all these promises, after 5 years, people started to ask for them. And perhaps these elections was exactly the voice of the youth communicating that we are now have got enough, or we have had enough of all these mispromises that you guys are not putting into practice. And the youth today, they don't really associate much with historical political party. What do I mean by that? Even though we have got our opposition party that has gotten a lot of votes this time around, I believe that that was just the youth utilizing the UNITA as a means to translate the message that they're tired of MPLA. But UNITA knows very well that the youth, that doesn't really reflect much in terms of them as well. So all the historical political parties, they are under a position where they know that civil society and the youth in particular are more and more becoming disconnected with the history of the country and perhaps the history of these two main parties. And therefore, they have to come up with a system that allows people to participate as civil society. And this takes me back to what I said in the beginning, local elections. Perhaps if we implement local elections, we'll see more young people that are not part of any political party stepping forward for position of leadership. And I feel like now the youth definitely has passed a message, not just for Angola, but globally, that the Angola youth is not passive on politics. They are very active, whether it's through music, whether it's through social media. They are extremely active right now in terms of politics, and they want to make sure that people hear the voices and they want to participate. So I would definitely say that the Angolan youth is perhaps the number one takeaway from the 2022 elections because of the way they have participated in the whole process of election.
All right, Angelo, now the COVID-19 pandemic was a major watershed globally. It really opened governments across the world to the realities of the modern time. And right now in Africa, there's this talk of, not just talks, but the reality of the Ebola virus. In Uganda, they have cases. I don't even want to go to the economy of Angola yet. What I want to ask is, in terms of policy issues from the government, we know the realities on ground since the COVID-19 pandemic. Would you say there has been any takeaway for the Angolan government in terms of policy in the area of health for the citizens?
Right. That's an important question, because if there's one thing that we have to give credit to, is the way in which Angola has dealt with COVID-19. It's been a reference, not just continentally, but also internationally. They took COVID-19 extremely serious, and that's perhaps why the numbers were extremely low in comparison to other countries. But more than that, one thing that we have to mention is that never like before did we see so much investment in terms of the healthcare. And COVID-19 really came to be an opportunity for the government to invest a lot. But the very important takeaway is that even after COVID-19, the investment in the health sector continued to be there. So this is something that we have to give a lot of credit to the government and to Lorenzo's leadership, that they invested a lot into the health system. Obviously, that there's still that question. There's a difference between investing in infrastructure and investing in human capital. And even though we still have a lot to go in terms of human capital, yet we still have got a lot of infrastructure that is now there, prepared for us to be using for the next years. So I would definitely say that COVID-19 was perhaps something that has literally put into pause everything that Lorenzo had as a plan in the first mandate. But at the same time, it actually became an opportunity for them to really come up with a lot of more focus into sectors that really matter for the people. So there's been a lot of investments into the health sector. People actually have given credit on that. The way in which they dealt with the whole pandemic, the policies that they made, they worked for the country. And obviously, I would definitely say that the takeaway of it is that more than anything, we can actually be the solution for our own problems. And we have to invest on things so that when situations like that happen, we always prepare. And that also takes me to other issues that happen and that can influence our economy internally, such as perhaps the crisis in Ukraine, whereby we started to understand that we have to invest into food security. We have to invest into agriculture. We have to come up with platforms that allow people to have, access to finance, to create business, to help the economy. And these are all the elements that perhaps became a learning perspective from COVID-19. And definitely, I would definitely have to applaud the government on that, because they have actually taken COVID-19 very serious, and they have come up with policies that have perhaps done a lot of good for the country. But again, this is a process, and I think we still have got a long way to go.
Okay, Angelo, now just before we let you go, quickly, we had the elections in August 2022. Now, what exactly are some of the changes or some of the footprints of the elections in August 22, and some of the things that you feel that Angola government can improve upon, or the Angola Election Commission can actually improve upon?
Right. So we had got the 2022 elections, which perhaps was a marking point for the history of the country, because never like before did we have such a disputed election since the Civil War. So we saw the MPLA reducing its representation in the parliament. We saw the MPLA losing its bigger gate, which is Luanda. We saw a rise in UNITA. We saw much more participation for the youth. So the takeaway is that this is a different step and a different page for the country. This is now a step whereby civil society are going to ask for more. They're going to demand for more. This is the moment where we have seen social media being solidified within Angolan politics, and the relationship between those who govern and those who are being governed. This is the moment where perhaps the opposition has got a chance to redefine itself, and perhaps being not that opposition that is connected to civil war, but perhaps an opposition that is also want to be part of the whole process of governance. This is the moment where perhaps we are going to start thinking, how would we deal with this dynamic of losing key constituencies like Luanda, while at the same time controlling other provinces. How can we now come up with a system that allows people in Luanda, where it's the majority of the people, to feel represented, because obviously there they voted against the ruling party. So I guess we are perhaps we have entered a stage where we might be more connected, or we might be open doors for local elections. We might be open doors for a more decentralization system in terms of power. We might be open door to seeing more social movement and political party emergence in civil society. But at the same time, I guess we might be towards a moment where we have seen, or we will see, the ruling party working like never before, because 5 years, they can go really quick. And I feel like after the results here that we got from these elections, it is the moment where it literally is now or never for the ruling party. And that's why perhaps we might see a lot of positive changes happening in Angola. But again, the whole relationship between, or the social contract, if one may call it, has changed completely. And this is the moment where we'll see Angola open a new page in terms of politics, economic, and society as well.
All right, just let me chip this in. Angola is a really beautiful country, right? According to reports, it even has the second largest waterfall in the continent. That's the Calandula waterfall. Aside that, there are even there's a debate as to the origin of the samba dance, that it actually started in Angola.
We're going back to the samba dance, right? Okay, he has been on this. I think maybe you will teach him some samba dance lessons. But anyway.
Yeah, but I'm getting it somewhere at this. Angola has a lot of tourism potential. How much of political attention is that getting?
I'm sorry, so can you repeat that? I was still focused on the samba dance, sorry.
Okay, interested. I believe you can samba too. Angola has a lot of tourism potential. How much of political attention is it getting?
Right, so this is actually one of the biggest questions in the country. How can we transition from a great potential into a great reality in terms of tourism? And that's because we are surrounded by countries that do so much in terms of tourism. Let's look at Namibia. Let's look at, all the countries around Angola. They do a lot in terms of tourism. So we have got reference around us, but we know that we have got so much that we can do in terms of tourism that we have to tap in, not just in terms of intentions, but in terms of actions as well. So tourism, like I said, Angola has got a lot, because the waterfalls that you just mentioned is just a tiny bit, and we have got a lot, not just in areas like that, but even in terms of culture. You said samba, but I can talk about kizomba, I can talk about kuduro, I can talk about so many things that come from Angola every day. That's why I feel like the most beautiful thing in Angola is people. People who go to Angola, they'll realize that Angolans, they're just special people. And that's perhaps now, we are now focused on trying to explore it more, because we understand that tourism can be a solution for much of our problems. But again, in order for us to tap into that, we need to solve basic needs, infrastructure, roads. So, and I guess this is perhaps why we are delaying a little bit our process into investing a lot in tourism, but the potential is there and people are not investing more and more. And that's perhaps why civil society also plays a role here, because with COVID-19, many people could not go abroad to explore. So we started to do internal tourism. And that's perhaps why many people started to be exposed to the potential of the country as tourism. And now, more than ever, we perhaps see more investment coming from abroad, because the country has also now opened up more for foreign investment. They've come up with policies that allow people to come and invest in a manner that perhaps allow them to feel more secured. And obviously, I guess for us as a country that we want to show the world that what we are about, we will be seeing more investment into tourism. But that can only be a successful story if we manage to solve the basic needs, such as infrastructure, such as roads, such as electricity, water. So as long as we can promote tourism while at the same time investing into these sectors, we will be one of the biggest countries in terms of tourism in Angola. In Africa.
Okay, now still on a lighter note, I hope we're not the ones who made you all dressed up in suit and tie. But anyways, it's Independence Day in Angola. How exactly is it celebrated, or how are you celebrating Angola's independence today?
Right, so it's a special day for us. So it's a day where obviously we as people have to sit down and reflect on where we came from, where we are, and where we want to be as people. Obviously, it's still a day that is much more celebrated by the older generation. And I think perhaps this is something that we have to do. How can we utilize our history in days like this to make sure that we start discussing what it means to be independent for people today? There's many people in Angola that they don't even know the meaning or the date of the independence. How can we utilize days like these to come up with activities, to come up with programs that allow everybody to feel represented, that allow everybody to have a national debate, that allow us to come together as people? How can we utilize dates like our Independence Day to build an identity around us that allows us to understand what it means to be Angolan? Obviously, celebrations move around the founding father of the nation, Agostinho Neto. They go beyond Angola, so we have got a lot of events taking place in the diaspora. We had got an event yesterday in Paris with UNESCO. We've got different events that are going to happen today, tomorrow, and until Sunday. Obviously, it's bank holiday in Angola, so people perhaps are out there enjoying the day. But again, it's important for us to start celebrating this day, sitting down, reflecting on us as people, reflecting on us as a nation, and try to build something that allows us to create an identity that allow us to see who we are as Angolans. But the celebrations, Angolans like to party, so I guess there'll be a lot of parties today. But in terms of more than that, we'll see the media coverage of our whole history. Who are the people that were part of this history? People were there, coming out to share the testimony. And us as young people, it's just it's our time for us to use these dates to reflect on the country that we want to build, and how can we celebrate our ancestors that have given us independence. So this is how we're going to celebrate, and obviously I want to thank you guys for allowing us to have this platform to celebrate our independence as country.
Thank you so much. Angela, just one request, please. After, I don't know how you can teach Dapo some samba dance, because he has just been going on and on about the samba dance. And of course, you're having celebrations in Angola, so let's be part of your celebration. Thank you so much, Edmilson Angelo, Angolan studies expert, for joining us all the way from Luanda, Angola. Also, thank you to Osvaldo Joa. Unfortunately, we could not get your audio, but thank you once again for trying. He's a local government and public policies analyst, also all the way from Angola, Luanda, Angola. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being a part of this special broadcast, and happy Independence Day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're still watching a special broadcast celebrating Angola's independence at 47, and right now we go for a quick break. When we come back, it's not over yet. We're still dealing with situations of economy, we're dealing with situations of the growth, economic transformation, and of course security in Angola. We just finished discussions on politics and governance. Do stay tuned to New Turtle TV.